As philosopher Slavoj Žižek once said, now is the time of monsters. But who are those monsters in that sense? They're not mythical beings or folklore. Monsters are the ordinary things that we fear. What we fear because we either don't understand or can't understand. Think about walking outside in the middle of the night and hearing a noise. You don't know what those footsteps in the dark could be. For all you know, it could be something dangerous or just a wild animal. But it's the uncertainty that scares you. That's how I feel about the fear people have in the trans community. It's not because we are literal monsters, but because people just don't understand us. So for now, I'm going to try to turn on the lights to show you we are not the monsters. To start, I want to give you guys an idea of what it is like to be transgender and what dysphoria is. The National Institute of Health defines it as a marked incongruence between someone's experience or expressed gender and the one they were assigned at birth. But that doesn't convey the feelings of utter hatred you have at looking at your reflection, or the discomfort you have at watching your body turn into something you can't recognize. So for now, to give you a better example of what it is like to affect someone, I'm going to give you my experience with my identity. When I was a kid, I never really had a certain time and date where I started to feel dysphoria. It was just always there. I just always knew, even since before I could remember, I never really wanted to stay a girl. When I was in preschool, I begged my parents to get a pixie cut so I could look more androgynous. I didn't know what the word was at the time, but I just knew I wanted to look a certain way where people couldn't tell what I was, and I could just tell them I was a boy. As a kid at recess, I didn't really fit in. It was always hard to choose between the boys at the playground or the boys at the basketball court and the girls at the playground, so I'd rather just sit alone, staring at mites and beetles. It was comforting that they couldn't tell what I was, and I couldn't tell what they were. It was just nice to live in my own little world without the burden of choice. It wasn't until puberty that the actual feelings of dysphoria began. I had my body grow very feminine. I curse how Mother Nature gave me and my sister the wrong genes. I had to deal with my body shaping my thighs, my hips, my chest into what felt like exaggerated proportions, my muscles and fat contorting into something I couldn't control, something I couldn't recognize, something I hated. My body felt heavy and confined to the point where many days it was a struggle to get out of bed or off the couch to take care of myself. I mean, why take care of a body I hated? And I was an early bloomer, so it was hard for me because I looked older than I was, more womanly than I was. I hated when people would call me little lady. I knew they didn't mean it that way, but it always just felt creepy having men the age range of my great uncle call me that. I always hated how confined I felt in my skin, especially my chest. It's what I hated most about my body. I hated how it sagged. I hated how it was a literal weight on my shoulders. I hated how lewd and ashamed I felt, even though I was just a child. I hated how no matter how hard people would deny it, that would be the first thing people see, and it'd be the key identifier for them to know I wasn't a boy. At around the same time, my sister grew more tall and androgynous. She always talks about how the substitute teachers would call her sir. She hated that almost as much as I hated being called a girl. It was comforting that both her and me could know what it's like to be misgendered, and we grew closer that way. It was either my 7th or 8th grade year that I started actively learning about the trans community. The main reason I wanted to was so I could play the part and I could get my parents to convince me to get a binder. I didn't feel like I was actually struggling enough to be trans, but I still wanted something to help make my chest look more flat so I could feel better about myself and for them to not stare at it as much. I started learning about dysphoria and the different ways people managed it. I studied the risk to my body that came from binding and what hormone replacement therapy would actually do to my body for it to appear more masculine. I started to learn that the trans community was more of a spectrum rather than a gradient. And as I was learning more and more, I realized I actually was trans. I find it ironic that I was going to pretend to be trans to get gender-affirming items. I felt like I needed to pretend because I was not trans enough to me, that I wasn't manly enough to me because I still like stereotypically feminine hobbies. I just wanted everyone to think that I was that way so I could just allow myself to be that way. It's almost poetic, little me wanting to pretend to be trans only to realize I actually am trans. Now that I've given you a piece of my past, I want to talk about our present. Nowadays, I feel like many people are scared of trans folks because they don't really understand what we do. Many people think that trans is a fad or that we're targeting children to join our agenda. So I'd like to address some of those common misconceptions to help calm the stigma. Many people think that the feelings of dysphoria are temporary and that eventually we will regret our transition. Although there are cases of people who have feelings of regret for transitioning, a large portion of those who do regret their transition are because of how they are treated afterwards, not because they are second-guessing their identity. Healthline states that only 13.1% of trans people detransition, and 82.5% of those who detransition do so because of discrimination in their work life, their community, their church, and even their homes. Many people believe that trans people under the age of 18 should not be allowed hormone replacement therapy or puberty blockers because they believe the individual is not mentally ready for that decision. I say that hormone replacement therapy and puberty blockers should be discussed and thought over by not only the individual, but also their parents and in consultation with a licensed practitioner, because it is a big decision, and this type of care isn't uniform. Sometimes you just need different types of medication, and it can take years for it to actually show results. And there are alternatives to gender-affirming care for those who aren't ready physically or mentally for medical care, which leads to my next misconception. Many people think that all trans people are planning to get surgery to feel more aligned with their identity at some point in the future. But this is not a requirement to be trans. Many trans people are either not comfortable enough with the surgery or can't afford it due to it being viewed as a non-essential procedure. I myself do not want a bottom surgery because it's personally too invasive for me. But I do want to go on testosterone and have a breast reduction in my 20s since I feel I'll be more mentally ready for that decision. But for the time being, I find that a great way to present as the gender I identify as is by looking to a trusted individual as the same gender and see how they present themselves, to see a blueprint on how you can present yourself. For me, it was my father, the manliest man I know. But for others, it can be anyone, a teacher, a sibling, a friend. As long as you feel safe enough to ask, it's okay. Now that I've shined a light on the broad idea of what the transgender experience is like, I want to give you all my best insight on this topic. From my experience when I was questioning my identity, the one thing I wanted was community. I wanted a safe place where I could just let out my frustration. I wanted someone to hold my hand and tell me that what I was feeling was okay. I wanted someone to look me in the eyes and tell me I was not alone. So the question I want you to ask yourselves is, how can I help someone questioning their identity? From my perspective, have compassion, educate yourself, be kind and patient, and remember, we are not the monsters.